So today we're basically stepping entirely out of the museum,
Right.
like leaving all those sterile glass cases behind and just stepping directly into the suffocating heat, the dust, and just the incredibly tense streets of ancient Makkah.
Yeah, it's a completely different vibe.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's an absolute masterclass in human psychology today. And hey, if you want to join us on these weekly historical deep dives to unpack these incredible moments with us, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and follow the show right now.
Definitely.
It is genuinely the absolute best way to make sure we can keep bringing these explorations straight to you. So, okay, with that out of the way, let's just get into it.
Let's do it.
You know, usually when we talk about history, there's this expectation of, like, emotional distance.
Oh, for sure, right?
We look at the dates on a page or the
Yeah.
locations on a map, the names in an index, and it just feels utterly binary. Like, it happened, it ended, it's clean. But today, that comforting distance just completely vanishes.
It completely evaporates. I mean, when you look closely at the specific period we're dissecting today, you realize very quickly that we are no longer looking at just dates or, static events.
Right.
We're looking at the rawest, most exposed elements of the human
It's
condition.
totally exposed.
Like, we're talking about surviving in an environment where literally every single social, economic, and physical structure is entirely weaponized against you.
Wow.
It is the absolute definition of a high-stakes, life-or-death environment.
And to guide us through this environment, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the incredibly dense and, frankly, emotionally devastating Chapter 11 of Maulana Mackey's audio series.
Right, the Sirat an-Nabi.
Exactly, which translates to the life of the prophet. And this isn't just a biographical recount, It's a profound study of extreme resilience and this terrifying clash between societal pressure and deep, unshakable conviction.
It really is.
Now, just to set the framework for you listening, and to set a strict rule for ourselves out of respect for the text and the tradition we're analyzing today, every single time we mention Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, may Allah be pleased with them, we will be using those specific phrases.
That's an essential baseline.
Yeah.
Because it really helps us understand the immense reverence the original material holds for these figures, and it genuinely grounds our analysis in the cultural and the spiritual context of the narrative.
Right, absolutely.
It reminds us that for the millions of people who study this history, these are not just characters, they are the absolute paradigms of human behavior.
Yeah, it sets the whole tone. Okay, so let's unpack this. The narrative immediately drops us into this fascinating and honestly pretty tragic story about a man named Ubay bin Khalaf.
Oh yeah, Ubay.
And this goes straight to the heart of something we all deal with, regardless of the century we live in, right?
Definitely.
How the people around us, like our immediate social circle, can just drastically alter our destiny.
The story of Ubay bin Khalaf is just brilliant because it's not primarily a theological debate.
Right.
It's a profound, timeless study of peer pressure and, well, the destruction of the independent conscience.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, when you dig into the historical accounts of this period, Ubay was actually exposed to the message of Muhammad, peace be upon him.
He heard it directly.
He heard the recitation, yes. He understood the concepts of monotheism and social justice, and on some level, it deeply resonated with his intellect. Like, he recognized the truth of it, but, and this is the tragedy, he had a really toxic friend.
A friend who essentially shamed him out of his own beliefs, right?
Exactly.
Because Ubay was basically on the verge of accepting the message. I mean, intellectually, he was already there.
Precisely. He was there. But Ubay was swayed by an associate who mocked him for even entertaining the idea.
Wow.
And to understand why this is so devastating, we have to pause and explain the mechanics of ancient Makkan society.
Yeah, because it's not like today.
Not at all. This was not a world of rugged individualism. Makkah was a hyper-tribal, heavily status-driven oligarchy.
Right.
Your tribe, your alliances, and your reputation among the elites were not just about popularity. That was literally your currency.
Your whole life.
It was your welfare system, your police force, and your physical safety. Your social standing was your entire identity.
So if you step outside of that, you're essentially jumping out of an airplane without a parachute.
Exactly. To step outside of that structure, to accept a message that explicitly dismantled the existing social hierarchy.
Which is exactly what the message was doing.
Right, a message that said the wealthy elite and the impoverished slave were equal before God. To accept that meant absolute social suicide.
Yeah.
Ubay's friend essentially leveraged that terror. He threatened him with social exile. And the text highlights a very powerful Quranic concept that perfectly encapsulates Ubey's ultimate agonizing regret. It says, "I wish I had not taken that one as a friend. He led me astray."
Wow. I wish I had not taken that one as a friend. That is incredibly heavy.
It's devastating.
So what does this all mean for us? Because when I read that, my mind instantly goes to modern society.
Oh, absolutely.
We love to think we have evolved past this kind of tribalism. Like, we have our individual rights, our customized feeds, whatever. But look at our echo chambers.
Oh, yeah.
Look at the intense, paralyzing fear of being exiled from a social circle or a professional network.
It's the same thing.
It is. I mean, how often do we see this today? People completely suppressing their own intuition, their own moral compass, just to avoid being canceled or ostracized by their in-group.
The underlying psychological dynamic hasn't changed a single degree. I mean, only the technology and the vocabulary have.
Right.
In Makkah, the cancel culture was absolute and it was deeply physical.
Yeah, it wasn't just losing Twitter followers.
No, if the tribal elites rejected you, you didn't just lose followers on a platform. You lost your livelihood, your ability to trade in the marketplace, your marriage prospects,
Everything.
and critically, your physical protection. You could be killed with absolute impunity.
That's terrifying.
So Ubey's tragedy is really the universal agony of realizing you betrayed your own soul to impress people who ultimately did not care about your well-being.
Yeah.
He prioritized the fleeting approval of his peers over an eternal truth that he clearly recognized. It is a terrifying mirror to hold up to any society, including ours.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's the realization that the crowd you are so desperate to please will eventually abandon you. And you are just left holding the bag of your own compromised integrity.
Exactly.
You traded your core values for a temporary seat at the cool kids table, and then the table just disappears.
That's a great way to put it.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because while people like Ubey were crumbling under the immense weight of this toxic peer pressure, the history shifts to show us the exact opposite reaction.
Right.
It takes us right to the Kaaba, the center of Makkah, and paints a scene that is honestly chilling in its intensity.
It is a scene of visceral, high-wire tension. The narrative describes Muhammad, peace be upon him, praying openly at the Kaaba.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Now, to the modern listener, the idea of praying at a holy site sounds serene, peaceful, almost mundane. But we have to analyze the why and the how of this specific historical moment.
Right, context is everything.
The Kaaba at that time housed hundreds of idols. It was the absolute epicenter of the polytheistic economy.
So praying to one God, there is a huge statement.
By praying there exclusively to one God, it was an act of profound public defiance. And he is entirely surrounded by the hostile leadership of Makkah.
Oh boy.
We are talking about the absolute heavyweights of the opposition. Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl, Walid bin al-Mughira.
And these guys are not just standing there politely disagreeing with his theological stance.
No, not at all.
They are actively engaging in psychological and often physical warfare. Like, they are the main architects of the hostility against him.
Absolutely. The enemies of early Islam were not interested in a civilized debate in the town square. They recognized that this new message threatened their monopoly on power and wealth. So they utilized intimidation, relentless mockery, and the constant looming threat of brutal violence.
Just constant pressure.
And yet, despite this suffocating atmosphere of hostility, Muhammad, peace be upon him, is completely immersed in his prayer.
Wow.
He is repeatedly reciting the phrase, Subhana Rabbiyal Allah, which translates to, glory to my Lord, the Most High.
Let's really pause on the mechanics of that moment, because it is blowing my mind.
Yeah.
He is physically surrounded by the most powerful, dangerous men in his city. Men who have explicitly stated they want to destroy him and his followers.
Exactly.
And what does he do? He lowers himself into prostration. He places his forehead on the ground.
Yes.
That is the most physically vulnerable position a human being can possibly be in. You literally cannot see an attack coming.
No, your vital organs are exposed. Your mobility is basically zero.
Right. And in that ultimate state of physical vulnerability, he declares that the highest authority in the universe is not Abu Jahl. It's not the tribal leader standing over him. It is his lord.
It's incredible.
The sheer mental fortitude that requires is staggering.
Huh.
I mean, how do you override the biological instinct to fight or flee?
It requires an unimaginable level of courage and absolute certainty.
Yeah.
By entering that profound state of prayer, he is effectively rendering their intimidation tactics completely useless.
Oh, because they run on fear.
Right. The mechanics of their power relied on fear. If you don't fear them, their power dissolves.
Wow.
He is blocking out the immediate physical threat of these powerful men by focusing entirely on the divine. It is just a masterclass in steadfastness.
Truly.
And the narrative gives us a specific, heartbreaking lens through which to view this moment, through the eyes of one of the companions, Abdullah ibn Masud, may Allah be pleased with him.
Right, because Abdullah ibn Masud, may Allah be pleased with him, was standing right there in the courtyard watching this entire incredibly tense standoff unfold.
Yes. And we really need to understand the painful reality of his position.
Okay, tell us about that.
Abdullah ibn Masud, may Allah be pleased with him, was from a significantly weaker social standing in Mecca at that time.
So he didn't have that tribal shield.
Exactly. He was an ally of a tribe, but not a fully protected elite core member. He lacked the political capital and the physical backing to intervene without facing instant catastrophic retaliation.
Oh, man.
This raises a deeply uncomfortable question about the observer's agony.
It's like the bystander effect, but magnified by 1,000.
Exactly. I mean, imagine the painful helplessness of witnessing a profound injustice, a psychological assault against someone you deeply revere.
Someone you know is speaking the ultimate truth.
Yes. But you also know with absolute certainty that if you step forward, you will be crushed instantly and your sacrifice won't even stop the abuse.
Right.
You're basically just throwing yourself into a wood chipper.
It is survivor's guilt mixed with total, paralyzing powerlessness. It must have felt like his heart was being completely torn out.
I can only imagine.
But watching Muhammad, peace be upon him, maintain that spiritual focus while literally in the crosshairs, it's profoundly inspiring.
It really is.
For you listening right now, think about the incredibly stressful environments we navigate in our own lives.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they might not be physically life-threatening like the courtyard of the Kaaba, but we all face boardrooms, family gatherings, or toxic social situations that feel completely hostile.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You feel the eyes on you, the judgment, the pressure to conform, and the ability to just drop an anchor internally, to block out the noise of the room and say, my core principles are higher than this immediate pressure. My worth is not determined by these people. That is a superpower.
It is.
It's ultimate emotional regulation.
It is the ultimate display of inner peace, weaponized against outer chaos.
Ooh, I love that phrase.
And what is so compelling about the narrative arc of Chapter 11 is that this quiet, solitary defiance eventually culminates in an event that is almost inexplicable.
Okay, where does it go?
Well, because that momentary frustration of the Makkan elite, their sheer inability to break his concentration, it sets the stage for a moment where the sheer force of the message itself overwhelms the entire city.
Right.
It overpowers the very enemies who were just mocking him.
Yes. This brings us to one of the most unbelievable incidents in the entire history. It almost sounds like something out of a cinematic climax.
It really does.
We are talking about the public recitation of Surah An-Najm. And honestly, this is where the dynamic totally flips.
This is a massive turning point. The history details an incident where Muhammad, peace be upon him, is reciting this specific chapter of the Quran, Surah An-Najm, publicly in the precincts of the Kaaba.
And a huge crowd is there.
Right. A large crowd gathers, including both the small group of believers and the hardcore polytheist enemies. I mean, the elite leadership who have been orchestrating the campaign of psychological and physical torture against him.
So everyone is listening.
Yes. And he reaches a verse that specifically commands prostration. The Arabic phrase is "Fasjudu lillahi wa'budu," meaning prostrate to Allah and worship.
And then the text says that everyone present, everyone, not just the devoted believers who already follow him, but the hardcore polytheist enemies who have staked their entire lives on destroying him.
Yeah.
They all spontaneously fall to the ground in prostration.
Yes. The entire gathering drops to the ground.
That is just wild.
It is an extraordinary linguistic, psychological, and spiritual event. And what's fascinating here is the sheer gravity of how this could even happen.
Right, because how does that work?
To understand the mechanics of this, we have to deeply understand the Arabs of Makkah. They were not easily impressed people.
No.
They were absolute masters of language. Poetry and rhetoric were their lifeblood. It was their entertainment and their historical record.
I'm obsessed with it.
Oh, totally. The annual markets like Yucca's were essentially massive, high-stakes poetry slams where tribes vied for supremacy through eloquence. They knew the structure of language better than anyone.
Okay.
But the Arabic of the Quran was unlike anything they had ever heard. It wasn't poetry, it wasn't standard prose. It possessed a rhythm, a depth, and an undeniable, overwhelming authority that completely bypassed their conscious prejudices.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this a little, or at least play devil's advocate for the listener who is trying to logically parse this.
Sure, go ahead.
Because on a strictly rational level, it makes absolutely no sense. These guys, the tribal leaders, have staked their entire political careers, their immense wealth, their social standing on destroying this man and his message.
Right, they have everything to lose.
They hate him, and
Yeah.
they just drop to the floor in public, in front of the people they are supposed to be leading.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
How does cognitive dissonance snap like that? Like, how do you fiercely hate a message but still physically submit to it in front of everyone?
It is a brilliant question, and it requires us to look at the dual nature of human consciousness.
Intellectually, economically, and politically, they were absolutely at war with the message. Their conscious minds were terrified of it.
Right.
But historical analysis of this event suggests that on a deeper spiritual level, the level of the innate human soul, or the fitra in Islamic terminology, the pure truth of the words resonated so powerfully that it created a momentary system overload.
A system overload.
Exactly. It temporarily short-circuited their ego and their political agendas. For a fleeting second, they just couldn't override their own soul's natural reaction to the divine command.
Wow.
The majesty of the recitation completely overpowered their political conditioning.
He's like, okay, let me try an analogy. Imagine you are a notoriously cynical, hardened music critic.
Okay, I'm with you.
You have built your entire career, your whole brand, on publicly hating a specific composer. You have written scathing articles destroying him. You've mocked his fans. But then, purely by accident, you are sitting in a concert hall and you hear a piece of music so profoundly beautiful, so transcendent, so fundamentally perfect that before you can even remember that you are supposed to hate it, you are already weeping.
Yes.
The beauty temporarily bypasses all your intellectual defenses, all your biases, and all your brand management. It hits the raw, unprotected nerve of your humanity before your brain can even put the shield back up.
That is an exceptionally accurate analogy.
Right.
The sheer, unadulterated majesty of the recitation temporarily dismantled their psychological defenses. They reacted before they could even think.
Yeah.
In fact, this involuntary submission was so dramatic, so wildly out of character for the Makkan elite, that rumors quickly spread like wildfire.
I bet.
The news traveled all the way across the Red Sea to Abyssinia, where some of the early companions, may Allah be pleased with them, had recently fled to seek asylum from the persecution in Makkah.
Oh, right. The Abyssinian migration.
Yes, and the rumor that reached Abyssinia was that the impossible had happened. All of Makkah, including the elite leadership, had converted to Islam.
Because logically, if you hear that Abu Jahl and the leadership are prostrating alongside Muhammad, peace be upon him, what else could it possibly mean? You just assume the war is over.
Exactly. Now, it is crucial to note here that the historical texts we are analyzing briefly touch upon and decisively dismantle the fabricated Quranic story.
Okay, what is that?
This is sometimes referred to as the Satanic Verses incident in some Western literature. It falsely claimed that the Makkan leaders prostrated because the prophet compromised his message and praised their idols.
Oh, I see.
The historical consensus and the text maintain absolute focus on the truth. There was zero compromise. The prostration was not a political negotiation. It was the involuntary result of the mesmerizing, overwhelming impact of the pure Quranic verses themselves.
Right, the truth was just too heavy for them to stay standing. Their knees literally buckled under the weight of it.
Yeah. But as beautiful and awe-inspiring as that moment of collective submission was, that music critic analogy I made earlier has a really dark side.
It does.
Because what happens when the music stops and the critic realizes everyone saw him crying, the embarrassment sets in. And that moment of awe was incredibly short-lived.
Yes, and this is exactly where the transition in our narrative gets exceedingly dark.
Yeah.
Because that momentary lapse in their defenses, that public involuntary prostration, It terrified the Makan elite.
It humiliated them.
Completely. It proved to them that their psychological tactics, their mockery, and their individual acts of physical violence just weren't working. The message was still overpowering them.
So they doubled down.
Exactly. The embarrassment of that involuntary submission didn't soften their hearts, it hardened them to stone. They realized they needed a systemic, brutal solution, which escalated the conflict from psychological warfare to outright, collective, physical starvation.
And this horrific escalation brings us to the valley, the Sheba Abi Talib. Okay, listener, I need you to really lean in and visualize the mechanics of this because the word boycott is far too mild. It's far too modern and sanitized the word for what actually happened here.
Total economic and social sanction is much more accurate, but even that sounds like a bureaucratic policy.
Right, like paperwork.
Exactly. This was a merciless siege tactic. The leadership of Makkah drafted a binding, formal pact against the entire clans of Banu Hashim and Banu al-Muttalib.
The entire clans.
They didn't just disagree with them, they banished them. They forced these families out of their homes in the city center and confined them into a desolate, rocky valley, a harsh gorge, really known as Shib Abi Talib, on the outskirts of Makkah.
And let's explain the actual terms of this pact because it was absolute. It was written down and physically hung inside the Kaaba to signify its sacred, unbreakable nature.
Right.
The terms were, no one in Makkah could trade with them. You couldn't buy from them, you couldn't sell a single grain of wheat to them, and you couldn't intermarry with them.
A total blockade.
It was a calculated, multi-generational strategy designed to slowly starve an entire community of men, women, and children into submission.
If we connect this to the broader mechanics of historical warfare, this is a classic siege.
Yeah.
You cut off the supply lines, you isolate the population, and you simply wait for the enemy to break under the sheer agony of starvation. They were trapped in this rocky, unforgiving valley for roughly 3 agonizing years.
3 years. I can't even imagine.
The historical accounts describe the conditions as utterly horrific. They were entirely cut off from the bustling Maccan markets. They resorted to boiling and eating the tough, bitter leaves of the desert trees.
Boiling tree leaves.
Yes. The texts painfully note that the cries of starving infants and children echoing out of the gorge could be heard by the people walking the streets of Makkah.
It is almost impossible to fathom that level of sustained, deliberate cruelty. We're not talking about nameless enemies across a border here.
No.
These were their neighbors. These were their literal relatives. The people ignoring the cries of those children were their uncles, their cousins, their former business partners.
It's chilling.
And the narrative really zooms in on the immense, staggering sacrifices made by specific individuals during this 3-year nightmare.
It does, and it highlights the really complex nature of loyalty. For instance, it details the role of Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle.
Right, let's talk about it.
Now, Abu Talib had not accepted the religious message of Islam. He remained a polytheist. But his deep tribal loyalty and his profound personal love for his nephew meant he chose to stand by his side.
Wow.
He voluntarily entered that gorge, providing crucial physical protection at great personal cost. He would literally make Muhammad, peace be upon him, switch sleeping places at night.
Wait, why?
So that if an assassin crept into the valley in the dark, they would strike him or one of his own sons instead.
Unbelievable. The love there is just profound.
It really is. But the text also draws profound, specific attention to the unparalleled sacrifice of Khadija. May Allah be pleased with her.
Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her. We really, really have to contextualize who this woman was before this boycott happened so the listener understands the sheer scale of the drop.
Oh, absolutely.
She wasn't just wealthy. She was arguably one of the most successful, elite, and widely respected business magnates in the entire Arabian Peninsula.
She was a titan of trade.
Yeah. She commanded massive trade caravans that rivaled the rest of Makkah's merchants combined. She lived a life of ultimate comfort, high status, and unparalleled independence.
Exactly. She was the absolute pinnacle of Makkan high society. And she traded all of it, every single ounce of her immense wealth, her luxurious comfort, her elevated status, to endure starvation in a rocky, sun-baked gorge.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
The history emphasizes this stark, devastating contrast, going from directing international trade routes and living in luxury to eating boiled tree leaves and tying stones to her stomach to stave off the gnawing pain of hunger.
Oh, my goodness.
And she did this willingly, simply because she refused to compromise her deep theological conviction and her unwavering support for her husband, Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Let me just pose this directly to you. listening to us right now.
Hmm?
I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning and losing all your wealth, your savings, your status, your comfortable bed, your access to a grocery store.
Right.
And not because the stock market crashed or because you made a terrible financial investment, but purely because you refused to back down on your core moral beliefs.
That's the key difference.
You could have your entire life, all your money, and all your comfort back in an instant if you just walked out of that valley and signed a piece of paper renouncing what you know in your heart to be true. Could you do it?
Most people couldn't.
Could you sit in the dirt and watch your body waste away for your principles? The level of spiritual endurance is staggering.
It is the ultimate definitive test of faith versus materialism. It is very easy to claim high principles when your stomach is full.
Oh, totally.
It is another universe to maintain them when you are starving. And yet, human nature is complex, and the narrative provides these incredible, almost cinematic details of resistance and humanity that operated secretly within this dark period.
Tell me more about that.
It mentions a man named Hakim bin Hizam, who was a close relative of Khadija. May Allah be pleased with her.
Yeah, this part of the history is like ancient high-stakes espionage. It's incredible.
It really is an incredible footnote of bravery. Hakim bin Hizam was not in the valley. He was part of the broader Makkan society, but he just could not stomach the cruelty being inflicted on his family.
Right.
So he would secretly load camels with wheat and essential food supplies in the dead of night.
Wow.
He would risk his own life, his immense social standing, and his safety to navigate the treacherous paths and smuggle food into the valley for his aunt, Khadija. May Allah be pleased with her.
The risk there is immense.
Oh, huge. If he had been caught by patrols led by someone like Abu Jahl, the consequences would have been catastrophic. He would have been branded a traitor. It shows that even in the darkest, most systematically cruel periods of societal breakdown, there are individuals who will risk everything for a spark of basic human compassion.
It's those tiny, defiant sparks of humanity in the pitch black that give you hope.
Exactly.
But as we move through the timeline of Chapter 11, we hit a devastating reality check. Because when the boycott finally breaks after 3 years, partly due to some Maccaning leaders finally feeling disgusted by the pack, and partly due to termites literally eating the physical document in the Kaaba.
Which is an amazing detail in itself.
Right, but the end of the siege didn't actually bring relief. The physical toll was simply too high. Escaping the valley ushered in what history literally and heartbreakingly calls the Year of Sorrow.
Because the physiological and emotional toll of those 3 years of starvation in the valley was insurmountable, especially for the older generation. Shortly after the boycott ended and they returned to the city, the two strongest, most foundational pillars of support for Muhammad, peace be upon him, his beloved wife Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, and his fiercely protective uncle Abu Talib both pass away within a very short span of time.
And the Sirat an-Nabi spends a significant, deeply painful amount of time detailing the deathbed scene of Abu Talib. And honestly, for me, analyzing this is the most emotionally devastating part of the entire text. It is so utterly tragic.
It is deeply tragic because it violently circles back to the very first theme we discussed at the beginning of this deep dive.
The peer pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The suffocating lethal weight of societal pressure. Here is Abu Talib, a man who suffered starvation for 3 years, who personally shielded his nephew from assassins, who gave up the prime and comfort of his old age to protect Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Right.
He loves him unconditionally. The bond is undeniable.
And as Abu Talib is dying, drawing his last breaths, the narrative describes Muhammad, peace be upon him, desperately, urgently pleading with him. He just wants him to cross the theological finish line. He wants him to say the words, La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. He says essentially, just whisper it to me, uncle. Just give me these words so I have something to advocate for you with before God.
It's heartbreaking.
It is the desperate plea of a nephew trying to save the man who saved him.
And the agonizing tension in that room is palpable in the historical text. You can feel the claustrophobia of it.
Yeah.
Abu Talib knows the truth of his nephew's character. He has raised him. He knows with absolute certainty he is not a liar or a madman. But surrounding his deathbed are not just his family.
Who else is there?
Standing right there are the elites of Makkah, Abu Jahl, and the very peers who orchestrated the brutal boycott.
Unbelievable.
And they lean in, interrupting this intimate final moment, and they strike at the deepest vulnerability of an ancient Arab leader. They say, Will you abandon the religion of your father, Abdul Muttalib?
What will people say? That is exactly what it comes down
Yeah.
to. The oldest, most toxic poison in human history. Even on his literal deathbed, staring into the abyss of eternity, the paralyzing fear of what will people say is stronger than his own independent choice. The ghost of his father's legacy and the judgment of the men standing next to his bed hold him hostage.
Abu Talib fears the mockery. Makkah is an honor and shame society, not a guilt society.
Right.
He fears the posthumous shame of being remembered in the poetry of the Arabs as the weak man who abandoned his ancestors' ancient traditions at the very last second out of fear of death.
Man.
So despite his overwhelming, undeniable love for his nephew, his pride and his fear of social ruin win. He refuses to say the words. He dies on the religion of his forefathers.
That's just so heavy.
The narrative concludes this staggering tragedy with a very stark, sobering theological reality, quoting the Quran, Allah guides whom he wills. You cannot force divine guidance into someone's heart, no matter how much you fiercely love them, no matter how much logic you present.
I mean, we really, truly have to sit with the deep, highly relatable pain of this moment. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, and you can see with total clarity exactly what they need to do to heal or to get out of a toxic situation or to be on the right path?
It's a universal feeling.
You lay it all out for them, you protect them, you argue with them, you sacrifice for them, and you just hit this massive, impenetrable wall of their own free will and their deep-seated societal conditioning.
Yeah.
You cannot walk the path for them. It is heartbreaking on a universally human level.
It is the ultimate tragedy of pride. Abu Talib's legacy and history is incredibly complex. He is an undeniable hero of protection and loyalty, but he is simultaneously a tragic victim of mock and peer pressure.
Absolutely.
He is the ultimate cautionary tale of valuing the opinions of men over the truth. And structurally, his death, combined with the devastating passing of Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, changes the entire geopolitical reality for Muhammad, peace be upon him.
All right, let's explain the mechanics of that, because without his uncle's tribal protection, because Abu Talib was the head of Banu Hashim, and without his wife's massive emotional and financial support, Muhammad, peace be upon him, is suddenly violently exposed.
The tribal shield is completely gone.
Gone. Abu Talib takes over the clan, and he actively revokes the protection.
Yeah.
Makkah is now officially open season on him. Anyone could kill him without triggering a tribal war,
Yes.
which forces his hand, pushing him to make a fateful, desperate decision to seek political and social support elsewhere. And that causal chain of events brings us to the journey to Taif.
This specific journey represents the absolute nadir, the lowest possible valley of his worldly experience, but it simultaneously showcases the absolute zenith of his spiritual character.
Right.
Seeking a safe haven, a new base of operations, and perhaps a receptive audience for his message, Muhammad, peace be upon him, travels to the mountainous city of Taif, located roughly 50 miles away.
Now, we need to explain Taif. And listener, if you thought the psychological warfare and starvation in Makkah was bad, the physical reality of Taif was on a completely different, horrifying level of cruelty.
To understand why, we have to look at the socioeconomics of Taif. It wasn't just a random city.
No.
It was a lush, high-altitude agricultural hub famous for its vineyards. But more importantly, it was the summer resort city for the wealthy Maccan elites.
Ah, so they are connected.
Deeply connected. The leaders of Taif were deeply financially intertwined with the leaders of Makkah. So when Muhammad, peace be upon him, arrives, he isn't just a stranger. He is viewed as a massive political liability.
Right, taking him in would anger Makkah.
Exactly. In Makkah, the opposition was largely political, psychological, with bursts of targeted violence. In Taif, the rejection was immediate, totally unified, and aggressively visceral.
Just an explosion of violence.
The leaders of Taif didn't just politely decline his message or mock him in a courtyard. They weaponized the entire city against him. They mobilized the streets. They ordered the children, the slaves, and the marginalized people of the city to line the streets and physically chase him out, hurling stones at him relentlessly for miles until his shoes were literally filled and squelching with his own blood.
It is a brutal, horrific image. Think about the physical and emotional compounding here. He is deeply grieving his beloved wife of 25 years. He is grieving the uncle who raised him.
Yeah.
He is physically exhausted from the journey and the lingering effects of a 3-year starvation. And he is driven out of a city under a massive hail of rocks.
It's just devastating.
He finally escapes the mob and collapses in a private orchard outside the city walls, seeking shade under a grapevine. And the historical accounts mention something incredible, something metaphysical here.
Yes.
It says, the angels of the mountains descend and offer him a choice. They ask for his direct permission to take the 2 mountains surrounding Taif and crush the entire city between them, to wipe it off the map.
And right here is where we see the ultimate defining essence of his character. I mean, any normal human being, bleeding, profoundly humiliated, grieving, and pushed to the absolute edge of physical and emotional endurance, would look back at the perpetrators of that senseless violence and say, yes, destroy them, they deserve it.
Of course.
It is the natural, deeply ingrained human inclination toward vengeance, or at very least, a desire for absolute swift justice.
Right. I mean, if I am being completely honest with myself, when we are wronged, our very first instinct is vengeance.
Exactly.
Somebody cuts us off in traffic and we want their engine to explode. Somebody insults us at work and we want them fired immediately. If a whole city stone me, we want the angels to crush the mountains. But his response to this offer of ultimate power and revenge is staggering.
The narrative breaks down the specific, intensely private prayer he makes in that bloodied state. It is a profound study in orientation.
What does he say?
He doesn't look at the city and curse Taif. He looks entirely inward and upward. The Arabic phrase highlighted in the text is ashkudafa kawati, which translates to, I complain of my own weakness.
Wait, let's really deeply analyze that psychology, because it's totally counterintuitive. He is the explicit victim of a violent, unprovoked mob attack, and his complaint to God is about his own perceived inadequacies.
Yes, the humility is almost unfathomable. He is essentially saying, oh Lord, if you are not angry with me, I do not care what these people do to me. The physical pain is irrelevant if my relationship with you is intact. I only complain to you of my lack of strength, my lack of eloquence, and my helplessness in delivering the message.
That's just incredible.
It is a profound demonstration of accountability. He assumes the responsibility for the failure of the message to reach their hardened hearts rather than focusing on blaming their cruelty. And then he explicitly and firmly addresses the angel's offer to destroy the city.
And he says no.
He says no. Instead of condemnation, he issues a prayer of astonishing, breathtaking mercy. He says, O Allah, guide my people, for they do not know.
For they do not know.
Yeah.
Now, that is the absolute definition of radical empathy.
It really is.
To look back at the people who are actively causing you immense physical and emotional trauma, to see them celebrating your pain, and to conclude they are acting out of ignorance. They simply don't understand the cosmic reality of what they are doing. It is the absolute pinnacle of emotional and spiritual maturity.
Nice.
It takes a strength that is almost beyond human comprehension to respond to stones with a prayer for guidance.
And what's truly fascinating here from a sociological standpoint is that he doesn't just passively forgive them, he actively advocates for their future.
How so?
He hopes that even if this current generation violently rejects the truth, perhaps their descendants, the children of these very people throwing stones, will one day understand and carry the message forward.
Wow.
He places his hope in the unseen potential of the future, completely overriding the intense, agonizing pain of his present reality.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and just zoom out for a second, because the narrative arc of this chapter is phenomenally dense. We have journeyed through such intense extremes of the human experience today.
We really have. If we synthesize the entirety of Chapter 11, it is a continuous, relentless escalation of psychological and physical trials.
Right.
We started with the insidious, toxic peer pressure of Makan high society, perfectly encapsulated by the tragedy of Ubay bin Khalaf losing his own soul simply to please a toxic friend and maintain his social status.
Then we saw the exact opposite. We saw the unbreakable focus of Muhammad, peace be upon him, at the Kaaba, tuning out the intense psychological warfare of the elites by anchoring himself in prostration.
Yes.
We saw the sheer, undeniable linguistic power of the word during Surah An-Nam, where the profound truth temporarily short-circuited the brains of the enemy and forced them to the ground in awe.
Which triggered the devastating escalation, because that embarrassment forced the elite to abandon psychological tactics and enact the physical siege.
A boycott.
3 brutal years of total starvation in the valley of Shib Abi Talib. The immense, quiet heroism of Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, who traded an international trade empire for the dust of a gorge to support the truth.
And the agonizing tragedy of Abu Talib, a man who gave everything to protect his nephew, but ultimately died on the altar of what will people say, chained to the ghost of his ancestors.
Right.
And it all culminated in the blood-stained dust outside the walls of Taif, where the ultimate physical rejection and trauma was met with the ultimate transcendent spiritual mercy.
It is a profound historical testament to the fact that the hardest tests a human being will ever face are often not just physical, but deeply emotional and social.
Absolutely.
And it proves unequivocally that conviction, when it is truly deeply rooted in the soul, cannot be starved out of a person, it cannot be bought with wealth, and it cannot be beaten out of them with stones.
It is absolutely incredible. So to you, our listener, I want to leave you with a final thought to really mull over as you go about your day.
Yep.
A thought directly inspired by that unbelievable transcendent moment in the orchard outside Taif. When you are pushed to your absolute limits, when your protectors in life are gone, when your resources are entirely depleted, and it feels like the world is literally throwing stones at you and chasing you out of town, what spills out of you?
That's a great question.
Is it bitterness, anger, and a deep-seated desire for revenge? Or do you, like we witnessed today, have the unimaginable internal strength to respond with radical empathy? What is inside your cup when it gets knocked over?
Powerful stuff.
Thank you so much for taking this intense, beautiful, and deeply moving historical journey with us today. Please do not forget to subscribe, like, and follow the show so we can keep bringing you these deep dives into the most profound moments of human history. We will catch you on the next one.